Tatsumi was, well, your average day kind of kid. He'd grown up in a small village for pretty much all his life. Well, as an orphan, he never really knew his parents, but that didn't really matter. You see, he had a pretty close relationship with many other villagers. They acted as if they were foster parents for him more often than not. And while in the village, he actually learned a couple of skills along the way. He learned the way of the sword and hand-to-hand combat from one of the retired soldiers that, well, lived in the village. And, of course, he would have ended up making a couple of friends throughout the years as well. He would have been well known and his swordplay would have been rather impressive over the years. One of Tatsumi's goals actually was to grow up and join the capital's military, or well, the empire's military. That way, he could actually afford to support his village. The village had given so much in order to raise him. He just wanted to give back to his community, considering the fact that they weren't necessarily all that well off. When he reached a certain age, he, alongside two of his friends, would actually leave the village in order to go travel to the, well, empire, or the capital. Before he'd leave though, the village elder would actually hand Tatsumi a strange item. It was apparently a figurine for their idol, though it was shaped like a skull. The village elder explained that it was meant to be for good fortune during his travels to the capital. Tatsumi, well, he would appreciate the gift and he would go along his way. Unfortunately, well, he and his friends would end up actually getting split up along the way, considering the fact that they actually got attacked by some bandits along the way. Yeah, Tatsumi would be forced to find his way to the Empire alone from there on. He was hoping that he could eventually reunite with his friends, but he would eventually find his way to one of the Empire's cities on his own. He'd find himself tricked by a con artist though, and he would be left completely broke. Yeah, this wasn't looking so good for Tatsumi. You see, he was now alone in an unfamiliar city with no money to his name. He didn't know how the situation could get any worse than this. At first it seemed like things were beginning to look up for him when the noble took pity upon him though, and invited him back to her home, where he would actually be taken care of until he could get back on his own 2 feet. He had an eerie feeling about the whole situation though. He didn't know why. It didn't help that he was hearing about the current state of the empire and there being some sort of assassination group by the name of Night Raid either. During the night, the mansion would get attacked by Night Raid itself. Tatsumi would witness the group take down the guards in a swift motion. He would have realized right then and there that he needed to protect the girl who had helped him off the streets. It was either that or she was going to die. He would do his best to find her, and when he found her, she would have actually been with one of her guards at the time. Well, one of the remaining guards at the very least. Yeah, Tatsumi would try to be an extra form of protection for the girl, whipping out his sword against her assailants. A black-haired girl with a katana would have actually easily disposed of most of the guards, and Tatsumi would at this point be Arya's last form of protection at this moment. He would attempt to battle against her, but he would have realized early on that this was a losing battle. Although Tatsumi usually prided himself in terms of his swordsman skills, this woman right here was just above and beyond. She was far more skilled than him, far more skilled than he probably ever would be. She would actually try to explain that he wasn't a target though, which would confuse Tatsumi. She would even say that it would be in his best interest to remove himself from the premises. Don't get caught up in, well, their situation, to say the very least. Tatsumi would actually refuse though. Akame would be left with no choice then, and she would kill Tatsumi right then and there. You see, Akame would have actually found Tatsumi in a different area here. Leone wouldn't have been fast enough to stop her either. Tatsumi would have been left bleeding out and losing consciousness. The poison was circulating all throughout his body at this time. The last thing Tatsumi would end up seeing was Akame walking over to Arya with her blade in hand, ready to kill the girl. He'd tried to reach out in a futile attempt to muster enough strength to get up and save her. The world would go dark for Tatsumi right after though. He thought this was the end, but he would wake up in a strange, unfamiliar area. He'd be confused as to what happened. He thought for sure he was about to die back there. Maybe it was all a bad dream. That theory would actually quickly be thrown out the window though when he noticed the blood on his clothing and the cut mark around his shirt. If that was the case though, how was he still alive? Not only that, but where was he? He'd look around the area and his eyes would actually widen at what he saw. He wanted to puke at what he was witnessing right now. There was a myriad of tortured and dismembered bodies locked up in cages. Who could do such a thing? He'd noticed a familiar face mixed up in the madness though. One of his friends that he ended up getting split from early on. What made it even worse was that this was a girl that he actually had a crush on. The girl that he wanted to spend the rest of his days with, but no, that was never going to be the case, so now she was dead. Seeing this, he felt defeated. He couldn't protect anyone. He couldn't protect the person who took him off the streets, and he couldn't protect those closest to him. How did he ever expect him to join the Empire's military if he couldn't even do such a simple thing like that? How could he join them if this was going to be the way he was going to act? And be so unreliable. He was the disgrace of a potential soldier. He never knew that this world could be so cruel. He didn't know who saved him back there, but this must have been a cruel joke in their eyes to simply leave him here to see such an inhumane action done to others. Tatsumi would contemplate where he would go from now, but he'd hear a voice call out toward him. He'd be confused and look around, wondering where the voice was coming from. He would actually be directed to a piece of glass on the floor. It would show a reflection of him, but it was strange. His reflection was talking back to him. Tatsumi's reflection would end up revealing what happened that night. Tatsumi was supposed to die that night, yeah, but the totem he carried with him actually held a spirit. That spirit was, well, him, the guy he was talking to right now, or at least the reflection, you could say. You see, in his dying moments, the spirit actually bonded with Tatsumi's body, granting them a second chance at life. There was a consequence though, and that was that his body ended up getting possessed by the spirit. Tatsumi was given another fighting chance though, and that's all that really mattered. He decided to do the boy a favor by defeating those night raid guys. They were actually fairly weak though. The black-haired girl was probably the easiest to take down. Well, either her or like maybe the one with pink hair shooting like laser beams from a gun or something. He wasn't all too sure on how that worked, but those two were probably the easiest ones out of the whole group, surprise surprise, considering how their main strengths came from, well, either the gun or the poison in, well, the katana in terms of, well, Akame, or, well, the black-haired girl as far as the spirit would have known at the time. Although there was poison in that katana, which probably would have been enough to kill a regular human, well, they were no longer regular humans or a regular human. They were actually immune to that poison. Flashbacks to that moment would begin to occur as the spirit continued talking about the fates of all those he had to face off against last night. Tatsumi would begin to breathe heavily and grip the dirt around him. He refused to believe he was capable of such actions, even if he was possessed technically. It was still his body that did it. Tatsumi would question what happened to Arya, to which it would be explained that the spirit killed her too. None of these guys were innocent in his eyes. Night Raid was full of assassins, and that girl planned on torturing him before Night Raid came and got involved. This whole storehouse was full of the victims of that girl and their family. He first heard about it from the guy in the suit of armor while they were fighting. He was actually a rather skilled fighter. Well, not only just skilled, but strong as well. The Akame girl, she was skilled, but she wasn't as strong as this guy physically. I don't even know what I was saying. He was, well, trying to convince them that this girl was just as bad, if not worse, than them. All of her terrible deeds throughout the years would be listed out by Bulat. If you didn't believe him, well, he could always check the storehouse as proof. He would have killed a man before deciding to check inside the storehouse though, in order to just appease the curiosity. Sure enough though, that guy was telling the truth. That guy in the armor was right about Arya. Arya, noticing what was about to happen, she would actually try to flee the scene, but he would have simply thrown their sword at her, or at least Tatsumi's sword at the girl, and the sword would have plunged itself through her stomach. Tatsumi couldn't believe what he was hearing right now. He had to be dreaming, right? He tried pinching himself, but it didn't work. He had to get out of here. The smell of dead bodies was going to make him throw up. Tatsumi, while fleeing the scene, would encounter all of the dead bodies of Night Raid. He was struggling to hold down the contents of his stomach at this point. The next thing Tatsumi knew, he'd end up encountering some soldiers though, while trying to flee. They would question what happened to him, noticing the ripped up shirt and blood on him, and blood on his shirt as well, blood on his coat and everything. Tatsumi wouldn't know how to explain it properly. It wasn't like he could just say that his spirit took over him last night and went on a rampage or something. No, they would think that he was crazy and probably try and lock him up in a mental asylum or something. He supposed he could mention the Night Raid part though. He wouldn't technically be lying after all. He'd simply say that Night Raid happened and direct the soldiers over to the site. Needless to say, the soldiers would be shocked at the sight of all of this spilled blood. Tatsumi would explain that the group tried to attack last night. They murdered almost everyone there, but he managed to survive somehow. He tried to protect the girl who took him off the streets by fending off against the Night Raid members, but he was unsuccessful. He didn't know what happened after that. He just blacked out, and the next moment, the whole field was scattered with their dead bodies. From the story Tatsumi gave them, the soldiers would immediately hold Tatsumi in high regards. It sounded as if he went into a blind rage, managing to overwhelm all of those Night Raid members. There were more, but these guys were probably some of the most prominent in their city. The boy sounded like a potential threat to the Empire, but also a useful weapon if they played their cards right. Just maybe they could recruit a powerful ally in the form of Tatsumi, and they could probably nurture his latent skills, maybe turn him into a fighting machine on the side of, well, the Empire. But if he refused, well, they could simply label him a criminal and kill him right then and there while his guard was down. The soldiers would offer Tatsumi a ride back to the capital, where he could get a fresh change of clothes and where they could get him some proper assistance after what must have been a traumatizing event. Tatsumi would be hesitant at first, but he would actually accept their offer. Maybe the capital wasn't full of wretched people like Aria. Maybe she was just an exception, and maybe there were just better people if he looked hard enough. He also figured that it would be important to accomplish the dream of his deceased friends, even though he felt as if he was a failure. He didn't want to become even more of a failure towards his friends by deciding to not become a soldier when given such an opportunity. He planned on becoming a high commanding general in the military and use that money in order to provide funding for his village just like his friends would have wanted. He also needed to I can't speak today. He also needed to gain control over that spirit, since their presence could be a danger if it went unchecked. And he also had a feeling that if he continued to leave it unchecked, there was going to be some serious consequences. He knew that there were more powerful people out there, and if he was just going to run rampant, then somebody would have to stop him one day, and he didn't want that day to ever happen. He was already given a second chance at life. He didn't want to screw this one up.
But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for right now, Titan Clan. This is going to be part 1 to what if, well, Tatsumi was Ghost Rider, or well, the Spirit of Vengeance, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, as you guys know, if you liked the video, maybe hit that like button, maybe hit that subscribe button if you've been rocking my content for a little while. Also, maybe share the video to some others who may be interested in this sort of content. Oh, and maybe leave a comment as well. But beyond that, it is your boy King Titan X, signing out.